All right. Hello and greetings from Manila, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you, wherever you are joining us in the world. Welcome to the 41st session of ADB Circular Economy webinar series. So these webinars are our platform to showcase technology solutions, new approaches, emerging issues, and case studies that promote circular economy in Asia and the Pacific. This is organized and convened by ADB's Circular Economy Working Group. I'm Erin Sinova. I am the Project and Knowledge Management Lead of ADB's Regional Technical Assistance Project on promoting action on plastic pollution from source to sea in Asia and the Pacific. And today, I am your moderator. So for today's session, we will discuss market-based approaches for enabling plastic circularity with a focus on policy options for Thailand. Our session today is titled Effectiveness, Efficiency, Equity, and Enforceability, Evaluating Economic Instruments for Thailand's Packaging Waste, which will explore several economic instruments and their feasibility for reducing plastic pollution. And in case you're not familiar, economic instruments are market-based policy tools designed to influence producer and consumer behavior through the forces of supply and demand in order to achieve desired outcomes. So in this case, the desired outcome would be to reduce plastic pollution and enable a circular economy for plastics. Now, compared to traditional regulations that tend to dictate or set standards for specific actions or outcomes, one major example being a ban on single-use plastic bags, economic instruments allow for flexibility so that companies and individuals are able to change their behavior and can stimulate innovation and can even lead to cost-saving measures when it comes to deploying environmental actions. So today, our discussion will explore the effectiveness and feasibility of these instruments in the Thai context, and we will hear insights that are relevant for other Southeast Asian countries. Today, as you can see on the screen, I am joined today by my colleagues, all of whom are calling in from Thailand. Vincent Aloysius is the team lead and circular economy specialist with Sureka. Dr. Panate Manumay Vibol, lecturer of the International College at Boracay University, and Dr. Sujitra Vasanadumrongdi, who is senior researcher for Sustainable Environmental Research Institute at Chulalongkorn University. Today, we will hear from on their insights based on an ADB brief that Vincent and Dr. Panate co-authored titled How Thailand Can Apply Economic Instruments to Accelerate Plastic Packaging Circularity, which was published just this past March and is now accessible on adb.org. So if you would like to have a copy, you can click on the QR code here. The session today will cover findings from this brief, and you will have an opportunity to ask our authors your questions. And this brief is based on outcomes from ADB's work supporting plastic circularity, including from the work that we did together under our Regional Technical Assistance Project on marine plastic pollution. And then later, we will also hear from Dr. Sujitra, who will respond to the findings and recommendations presented in the brief. So let's get into it. I want to now introduce our first speaker, Dr. Vincent Aloysius. As I mentioned, Vincent is the team lead for the Technical Assistance Project with ADB and is working with Sureka. Prior to his current role, Vincent was a program management officer in UNEP's Sea Circular Project. He was responsible for the markets and value chain focus, where he led projects on the themes of innovation in the plastic value chain, city-level actions, capacity building, finance and business models, and policy advancement. In the private sector, Vincent has extensive commercial and operational experience in environmental services, resource recovery, and waste management. So, Vincent, over to you.
Good afternoon and greetings to everyone. Thank you, Erin, for that introduction. As Erin mentioned, the work on the Technical Assistance Project in Thailand covered a study on economic instruments to help policymakers make more informed decisions. We are happy to share the insights gained from this study to encourage wider conversations on economic instruments that can be applied in the value chain to stop leakage, prevent pollution, and accelerate circularity. So let's get into it. Could I have the next slide, please? Okay, so plastics production in Thailand is an important part of the petrochemical sector. It contributes to almost 8% of the country's GDP. Now, every year, approximately 3 million tons of virgin plastics are turned into single-use plastics, or SUPs, and the top three products account for 80% of all the plastic packaging. These are products such as monolayer bags, what we use as carrying bags or shopping bags, multi-layer pouches, which are used for packaging snacks, and then we have the bottles. So this high throughput of plastics coupled with the leakage in the waste management system contributes significantly to marine plastic pollution. Now, this situation is a typical example of negative externalities of plastic pollution coming from production and consumption that can be the target of economic instruments. Next slide, please. So Thailand is working on accelerating plastic circularity, and as part of these efforts to address plastic pollution, the Pollution Control Department, or PCD, under the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment, is proposing a draft Sustainable Packaging Management Act. And this study actually supports PCD's efforts towards the identification and the possible implementation of economic instruments in a targeted way along the plastic value chain. Let's have the next slide, please. So in the study, we looked into how and where the selected economic instruments can be applied in the value chain. This assessment, an ex-ante or forecast of the possible outcomes, is a good way to help policymakers test the ground and decide on which instruments would be suitable to apply. So it provides insights that can encourage the introduction of appropriate economic instruments to stimulate circular economy. Now, establishing the baseline was a very first step in the work that was conducted, and relevant stakeholders in the plastic value chain were identified while reviewing the reviewing the regulatory framework that's existing. The research team studied plastic production, manufacturing, the capacities, export and import, volumes, consumption, and generation of plastic waste. Also looking at collection and recycling, and what are the challenges related to plastic packaging management in the country. Next slide, please. So looking at policy instruments applied worldwide in the solid waste and circular economy domains, and referring to data available from PINE, or Policy Instruments for the Environment report, covering both OECD and non-OECD countries, we find that the majority, or 68% of these, are in the form of taxes and fees. Now, other instruments such as environmentally beneficial subsidies, deposit return schemes are far less utilized. Now, this could be mainly coming from the fact that, applying taxes and fees compared to other market instruments would be a lot easier. And also the outcomes of taxes and fees would be much more predictable compared to other instruments in terms of its effectiveness and efficiency. Now, this is why an ex-ante assessment forecasting possible outcomes will come in useful to support decision-making for policymakers. Next slide, please. Now, in the value chain, economic instruments are market-based policy tools and designed to influence producer and consumer behavior through the forces of supply and demand to achieve the desired outcomes. Now, this is unlike command and control approaches, which dictate specific actions or outcomes, such as banning of certain SUPs or adhering to specific standards, which could include, for example, setting minimum limits to recycled material content in new packaging products. So market instruments generally allow for flexibility by letting companies and individuals make decisions based on their own cost structures. So this adaptability is key to the effectiveness and efficiency of the instruments. And market actors also can alter their behaviors in response to the instruments. And this, in turn, can result in a reduction of pollution. Now, incentives can also be offered for investments in plastic circularity that can lead to the development of capacity for circular processing activities. So here we see where the value chain in the selected economic instruments are placed. Yeah, so 6 instruments were considered in our study. These were taxes on virgin plastics and exemptions on recycled materials, tax incentives for recycling investment, green public procurement, single-use plastics packaging, levies and rebates for reusable containers, advanced recycling fees, and finally the deposit refund system. Next slide, please. So coming back to the 4 E's in the title of our webinar today. Now, the assessment of the economic instruments focused on the environmental and financial impacts as well as the social impacts. Now, the outcome of the economic instruments were assessed on 4 key aspects, and these are, firstly, effectiveness, meaning do the economic instruments lead to intended results, achieving the reduction in marine plastic pollution? Then we look at efficiency. Are the resources required to implement the instruments justified, given the changes and the effect that it can achieve? Do we need to put in a lot of effort and resources to get very little results, or can we select more efficient instruments? Then we come to enforcement. For the enforcement side, we look at, looking at resources that are available, but also regulations and the authority for implementation of the resources. Are these in place and within the capacity of the authority to do the enforcement? Now, what gaps need to be addressed? And also, how about situations when the authority might be overlapping between different agencies? So that could also pose as an issue for the enforcement side. Now, finally, on equity, with the cost, will the cost and benefit be equitably distributed? On the social impact aspect, consideration should be given to gender-related aspects and marginal communities, especially also low-income segments and the informal waste collectors. Now, from a gender perspective, women play a significant role in the purchasing and consumption decision in households. Their contribution to the success or failure to any economic instruments cannot be underestimated. The same goes for the informal sector that play a role in collection and recycling. These economic instruments are expected to address challenges upstream and downstream of the value chain. The instruments can incentivize and help to de-risk investments into innovations and businesses that can enable circularity. So for policymakers, conducting such an assessment is very useful. It allows for better informed decision making, and it can help reveal potential hurdles, including when legal reviews may be required. So the message here is that economic instruments can be targeted to areas that we wish to address based on the needs and the priorities of the National Action Plan. So I will conclude my part here of this presentation, and I'll pass it back to Erin to introduce my colleague, Dr. Panit. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Vincent, for that very helpful introduction. So as we saw here, there is a clear kind of basis and rationale for why we would want to look at economic instruments and how, through careful and targeted design, it has the potential to address certain needs in the reduction of plastic pollution. And just going back to the slide here with the 4 E's, we'll learn a little bit more about the study that we had undertaken and how we were able to evaluate the instruments that we are exploring for Thailand. So to do that, I will now introduce you to our next speaker, Dr. Panit Manamai Vibol, lecturer at the International College and Burapha University. He is now the Assistant Dean responsible for academic services and sustainability management. He works with communities, local governments, companies, and NGOs for workable zero-waste solutions to advance the circular economy. He has been instrumental in the drafting of extended producer responsibility laws for packaging and electronic waste in Thailand. And Dr. Panit holds a PhD from IIIEE in Lund University. So Dr. Panit, over to you.
Hey, thank you, Erin, and thank you, Vincent. And good afternoon, everyone. So I'm very happy to kind of share with you the kind of key findings from our study for ADB that Vincent and I and the team, we did it together and delivered to also PCD last year. And I would like to, before I begin, that there is another key member of the team who might not be able to attend today, Dr. Sombat Nesakul, who actually another economist who helping with this analysis. So I would like to kind of shout out for him before I begin my presentation. Okay, now can we move to the next slide? Yeah, and next one. So first, I would like to kind of continue from what Vincent already present about the context of the project, the framework, and I would now want to address like how we address the analysis, because this is exam analysis, which means that we don't really have this instrument implemented in full in Thailand yet. So we need to make a lot of assumption. So first set of assumption is about the baseline. This is kind of the assumption with the existing economic, and we assume more or less that it goes steady if we don't have any intervention. So these are the analysis which would make it into the next slide, which is the material flow analysis. So we base upon the data from like 2021, 22. So roughly, we round up the number every year, about 2.5 million tons of plastic turned into packaging and, both the primary packaging and also some service packaging. Like, we use a lot of carry bag in Thailand. We still use a lot of that and other single-use plastic item. So about 2.5 million tons. Most of them now primarily sourced from virgin material. We have like a small portion of recycled material. We have the Food and Drug Administration in Thailand just allow certain type of recycled plastic to be used again for packaging in the last few years. So we have a little bit of that going back into the packaging industry, but mainly from virgin material. And then the key point is at the right end, you see leakage. So that the estimation of the leakage of plastic that went into the ocean. And this is based on another kind of modeling that I did with WWF a few years back. We update with the data to be like 2021 and 22. And I would like to kind of just to mention that this number, even though we kind of using like the bottom-up approach, meaning that we take the statistic from 7,000 local government and build up the number, we actually arrive in the same range, same range that Professor Jambak present in 2015 when she estimate from the top-down perspective. So every year, about 130,000 tons went into the ocean. This is about like 5% if you put into the perspective of how much put on the market. 5%, but that's still kind of making Thailand being in the top 10 of the world when it comes to the polluters who pollute the ocean. So this is a very critical number. So our objective is to see whether this economic instrument can reduce the leakage. That what define effectiveness in this study, because that is what we most concerned. And then looking at the recycling, the baseline, we have about 20% of recycling happen in Thailand. So that like the baseline. Now, this slide, I think Vincent already presented, we have 6 economic instruments that would be dropped, one at a time, first in the first analysis in different part of the value chain of the plastic. And we want to see how much it can reduce leakage. So that red arrow, that the effectiveness. So can we go for the next slide? Now, let's look at the result. Because of the limited time, I cannot present in full for all 6 instruments, but I will kind of go into the detail for the first instrument. So you see like how we approach it. So basically for each instrument, we have like 3 steps. The first step, after we have the baseline, then we will see where the instrument will be introduced in the value chain. Like this one is the tax on virgin plastic. And on the opposite side, there can be like the exemption for, recycled plastic. So this is interject into like the first arrow into the value chain. Then we have to estimate what would be the level of economic instrument, because economic instrument play with like the incentive. So how big is the incentive? So we need to doing two approach, mainly like international benchmark. We see other countries when they introduce this instrument, how much do they introduce? And then we double check with like the government, with the industry in Thailand to see their perspective on that. So that's the first step. We see the level that the economic instrument will be introduced. The second step, we see the impact that this economic instrument will brought out into this value chain. So for tax on virgin plastic, we make following assumption based on the interview that we have, some based on the calculation we get from the MFA model. And then if we go to the next slide, you will see the logic behind the working of the tax on virgin plastic. Can we go to the next slide, guys? Yeah, so this is like the economic instrument introduced in the first arrow that I mentioned. Next one, you see the logic on how it affects and the number. So here you see that it reduced the virgin material because, there is tax on virgin material. So it dropped it. But it's not that much because the tax we expect that it will be introduced first at the lower level. The Thai government will not introduce like high tax in the first go. So that will have like some effect on the virgin material. The strong point of this instrument is that it applies across the board. So any type of virgin plastic that apply into the market having tax. So it rising a lot of revenue for the government, but that is not the policy objective in itself. So I know that it's rising like 400 million USD. That will not be earmarked for anything. This is just tax going to the government. It can have cascading consequence. So you see that the number of leakage is going down a little bit in this scenario. So it reduced like about like 10% on the leakage. So that like minimum effect because it cascading throughout the value chain. And this would be the first effect of the policy instrument. And next slide, we will see the third step. We benchmark these economic instrument against each other on the 4 scorecard that Vincent already introduced. When it comes to the tax on virgin plastic, the effectiveness is quite low. As I mentioned, that the effectiveness is defined on how much we can reduce the leakage of plastic into the ocean. This is not that big, the effect. efficiency is kind of right in the middle. I mean, it have some effect like 10%, and it come at the cost of 34,000 USD. This number is coming from, the revenue that this tax rising for the government. We don't see it as the benefit in itself. We see that is the taking away some economic resources from the economy for this kind of, 11,000 ton of the effect. So we see like the effect per ton. So that's how we define efficiency in this study. Equity is kind of not that big an issue because it applies across the board. So I think equity is quite fine. Enforcement is quite okay because this is instrument that can introduce within existing framework. We don't need to have a new law to introduce these tax. So that's quite okay when it comes to enforcement. Now, let me speed up. When it comes to the second instrument, I will just present like the third step, which is the final step of the analysis. So the second instrument, can we go to the next slide? This is the tax incentive for recycling investment. Again, the strong point, similar to the last one, it can be introduced under the existing framework. We already have the Board of Investment of Thailand giving like some incentive package. So we think that this can be ramped up with more support to recycling technology. So we assume that if we have this kind of exemption, expanding it, it might kind of cut the revenue to the government like 40 million USD, but it can increase the amount of recycling plastic. So that the benefit about 5,000 tons. The cost is quite good for this 40 million, and if we can have like 5,000 tons achieved, like increase in recycling. So efficiency is quite good. The effect on the leakage to the ocean is really minimum. It's negligible because it will kind of increase the portion of high value recycled plastic for recycling. But what leakage into the ocean is mainly the low value. So this incentive alone will not address the problem directly. Enforcement as very high because it's already kind of being used right now, and it's like more the expansion of the existing framework. Equity, we score it quite low because according to the interview, it seemed like, bigger player, bigger investor can access to this instrument much better than like the smaller one. So informal sector would not get this kind of tax benefit from BOI. We will not see that. So equity can be kind of the issue for this second instrument. The third one, which can also, next slide, sorry. The third one, which can also be introduced under existing framework, is the green public procurement. These almost have like negligible effectiveness, unsurprisingly, but it's quite good for the other three aspects. This is like the continue of the work that PCD already promote green public procurement. So I will not talk much about this. Can we go to the next one? This is the exciting one. Because this is the big instrument that if introduced, we will need a new law. There is no existing law that would kind of allow it introduced in the same fashion that other country has been introduced this levy on single-use plastic. It will hit the target because it addresses most of the single-use items that have like low-value plastic that leak into the ocean. So effectiveness is quite high. This is like the second largest impact in the set of the six. Even if the levy is quite small per each item, it can increase the effectiveness. And there have been double benefit because the levy normally will be earmarked to be used in related activity like cleanup action, in support source separation and recycling. So that add more into the effectiveness. Efficiency is very good for this instrument because the total economy is quite limited. It not affect all the packaging, so it really focus big impact. So this is the good thing. Equity and enforcement are a little bit tricky because new law would be needed, and equity sometimes poorer household would rely more on this, and they get more effect from the instrument. Now going to the next one, this is the largest impact. Can we go to the next slide? This is advanced recycling fee (ARF), which would be introduced under the scenario that Thailand will have EPR system. So the pro will collect the fee, and this would be advanced recycling fee for the producer. AIF, this is the instrument that we have arranged because certain packaging will have very small fee, like the high value one, but the other would have quite a high fee. So this is the range, and it rising more fund, and this fund will be earmarked to be support recycling and collection. So effectiveness is very good, efficiency very good. The same problem, we need a new law to support these instruments. And last one, this is a little bit controversial, and I think Dr. Shweta can add more on this. So the sixth instrument, next slide, is deposit refund system. Our analysis show that, if we want to focus on reducing the amount of plastic in the ocean, it might not be the ideal. But I want to explain a little bit simply because when we ask stakeholder about this instrument, the item that it will be applied normally are the one that have like very high recycling rate, like PET bottle. No one talking about, introduce it for flexible packaging. So it not directly go into like the packaging that we have problem with leakage. So effectiveness is not there yet. And it will cost quite a lot. It's amount the same size like the levy when it comes to the fund that would be generated. It only address like certain type of plastic packaging that might not contribute much to the problem. So that's why our analysis show that it low both on effectiveness and efficiency, but it have the advantage when it comes to equity. This is the one that would have redistribution effect because poorer people, a waste picker can get benefit from the instrument directly because someone might leave and without unclaimed deposit that they can use and getting some additional money. So this is good in that aspect, but it might not directly address the ocean problem. So this is the analysis, and the next slide will kind of compare all the instrument. So these are the, to make it easier. I know that I run out of time, so give me like two more minutes. That in the next part, which is the final part, can we jump to slide, guys? We come to the policy recommendation. First, we put together like short-term recommendation. By short-term, the first thing is that we don't need a new law. So it's only like 3 instruments that we should introduce. And we thought that, green public procurement have a minimum effect. So we dropped that. So this is the combination between tax on virgin plastic and the subsidy for recycling, which would be better for the government because now the subsidy would not pay out from the government money. They can kind of earmark certain amount of the tax revenue to sponsor that. So there have been some kind of, co-benefit when you introduce these two together. On the other hand, more recycled material, meaning that, the amount of plastic in the flow might still be quite the same. It's not kind of significantly reduced. So basically, we're not reducing the tap in this way. The benefit is that we reduce the leakage, maybe like 10%, but we also increase the amount of recycled material going back into the industry. So this is the core benefit. Now, if we more kind of advanced, if we move to the next slide, in the medium term, hopefully, because PCD, next slide, please. PCD is now under the development of the Sustainable Packaging Management Act. Ice, can we go to the next one? It's not changing from my side. Okay, excellent. So if you have the new law passed, your Sustainable Management of Packaging Act, then we can have the framework to introduce the single-use levy, the EPR system, advanced recycling fee. So this will have stronger effect. Basically, we can see the reduction in terms of plastic packaging. We estimate this effect to be about like 15%. So the input will be reduced, and then it's going to also significantly reduce plastic going to the ocean. This is why like big margin, like 75% will disappear. Disappear means that there will be better collect and recycle. So recycling will went up to like 40%, and the more going to the industry. So more recycled material going back like closed loop system. So this will be a significant effect. So this is like the combination that we suggest that we need the law. So that would be the caveat that I would have. Last slide. Based on this analysis, I mean, we can see that, I mean, economic instrument can be introduced as a package. Some would need a new law. However, I would like to make that this is the exact analysis. So in the future, we would need, more analysis, especially if it has been introduced, because when it has been introduced, we need to think in terms of execution. Deposit refund system, we don't even factor into the account, like how many stations you need across the country, what would be the cost of the vending machine. We just see like the impact of deposit and refund, just that. But in the real world, you need to have like execution, economic aspect of introducing these instruments. So these need to be better taken into account. And I have to say that this model is quite deterministic. So maybe more review and more kind of sensitivity analysis need to be checked. We did some such sensitivity analysis, but I think if we have a less deterministic model, that would be better. So that's all from my side, and I would be happy to take any question if you have. So thank you. Sorry for go over the time.
Thank you so much, Dr. Panay, for that excellent presentation. When I remember when we were first talking about this before, it was really interesting to see, your analysis through those 4 E's that you brought up. And, it really tells us that number one, each instrument that we look at here, they're, different contexts and different needs will dictate their effectiveness, their efficiency, their and the feasibility of implementing these, which tells us that there's no one instrument that fits every context, right? And that feeds into your recommendations where, we have this sort of complementary, but also a phased approach where some instruments can be implemented in the short term and then others can be done over a more medium term, depending on certain conditions. So I think that really, communicates an interesting lesson for us that, like what Vincent was mentioning earlier, these can be designed to be targeted and to address particular needs, whether they be in Thailand or in other countries. So thank you so much for your great presentations, Vincent and Dr. Panay. So we will now open this up for a couple of questions before we go to Dr. Sujitra. I see that our colleague Pia has a few questions and comments here in the chat. Okay, so I'll just go through his comments one by one. So yeah, the ADB brief on this topic is quite useful. I use some of the findings of the study to present like economic instruments for general solid waste management and circularity to government officials in charge of waste management in various developing member countries across Asia. So thanks for that, Pia. It's good to know that these findings are useful. I think it would be nice to share separately the methodology of how the ex-ante study was done. That way other countries outside of Thailand could replicate this study. And maybe Dr. Panay, you want to talk a little bit more about that here in this webinar. Yeah, maybe we could answer that for now.
Okay, yeah. Okay, Erin. And thank you, Pia, for the comment. I actually reading your chat now. Just address that one about like number two. I think the methodology can be shared. I think the difficulty are two things. First, we need the baseline for that country. So that might be a little bit tricky. It just happened that we have some previous study that we can use as the groundwork. When it comes to the effect of policy instrument, I think that can be transferred. And I want to note that after we complete this study, we actually have one research assistant who now still doing his master at Mapha Luang University. And thanks to Dr. Srita who comment, he is doing now meta-analysis. So if you're familiar with the methodology, now after he complete his study, we will have better idea on like what would be like the impact of these 6 instruments based on the regional review. So I think that number would be even better to be used if you apply it to like maybe like Philippines to Indonesia by basing on that meta-analysis. So I think it will be ready pretty soon.
All right. Thank you for that, Dr. Panay. And then maybe one more question from here in the chat, also from Pia. Are there any other countries in the world that are implementing a combination of economic instruments that are similar to the ones that are presented here in this webinar? Or is this something that is really kind of at the edge of knowledge or research in this field and in the planning stages for governments? So either Dr. Panate or Vincent, please weigh in.
I would say that when we review, we see a lot of instrument in EU. Many European countries have introduced like the levy, the tax on top of EPR. So we have seen that, and I think Tia already mentioned like Taiwan and Korea, South Korea. So those are like the other two at Japan. I mean, they have some kind of experience in this. So yeah, there has been.
Maybe I would say, while we're talking about economic instruments, I mean, we cannot also forget the strength, that you need from regulatory side as well. I think we need to create the demand. If there's no demand, then it's very hard to actually encourage, investments and also entrepreneurs to come into the value chain and introduce new capacities. So, for example, even in Thailand, the fact that, recycled materials can be introduced into food contact packaging is something relatively new. So this is a promising development, but such kinds of what you call development also need to happen from both from the regulatory side, maybe even, going as far as setting minimum limits on recycled material content in new packaging products. So these are the things that need to go hand in hand with economic instruments so that we can be heading towards circularity much faster. Back to you, Erin.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Panate and Vincent, for your insights. So, we've heard, your presentations and the outcomes of the study, and now we're going to get an expert to respond to the study findings and recommendations, also from the Thai context. So I would now like to call in Dr. Sujitra Vasanadumrongdi, who is a senior researcher at the Sustainable Environment Research Institute at Chulalongkorn University in Thailand. Dr. Sujitra holds a doctorate degree in environmental economics from Hiroshima University in Japan. Over the past decade, her research has focused primarily on solid waste management with an emphasis on plastic and food waste, extended producer responsibility, and circular economy policies and strategies. At the national level, Dr. Sujitra is a member of the Plastic and Electronic Waste Management Subcommittee under the National Environment Board and also serves on the Steering Committee on Packaging Management for the Circular Economy and EPR under the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment. So Dr. Sujitra, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to be the reviewer of this study. In the past, I worked closely with Dr. Panate for several projects. And as he mentioned that also the thesis committee for his master's student. So I had a chance to read the full report of this study as well, because if the general reader only read the policy brief, maybe as Dr. Pia mentioned, you could not see the detailed calculation method or the key assumption, the source, the data source for certain key assumption. So sometimes it's quite hard to convince leader to really understand or agree with the findings if we cannot see the detailed calculation. This is something that if you can add more detail or you can link with the full report. Or even the full report, sometimes it's quite hard for me to really follow the calculation. Sometimes I think there's some detail, but maybe the author didn't mention enough in the report. So sometimes it's quite hard to follow up. I think maybe if you can write more detail, explain more, maybe we will understand clearer and can follow the thought of the study or estimation. This is about the methodology, which in overall framework, I really like the way that you present, I mean, according to the plastic value chain and with the framework of 4E. But for myself, maybe as I mentioned, and I expect more to see more finding in detail and move up to the about policy recommendation. I also have the same comment. Maybe if you can add more on analysis of the existing situation in Thailand, for example, the CIT exemption from BOI, right, for the recycling industry. We already have it, but as Vincent mentioned, even Thailand lift off the ban on rPET for the food grade packaging, but still the demand is very low because the price of rPET is still high, and the recycling business, even they get the tax incentive from BOI, they still have to call for government support for example, mandatory recycle content or tax incentive on PCR purchasing costs to boost demand. So maybe if you can add more the current situation of the recycling business right now, and maybe add more on that, maybe we need more other regulatory instrument to complement the economic instrument. It would be give more a better picture of the current situation in Thailand. And I also like that you add more the factor of enforceability. But I'm not sure whether it also means political acceptability or not. I used to interview advisor from Department of Excise with the same question as you, like with the existing law framework, this Department of Excise can tax on virgin plastic or specifically on virgin single-use plastic, right? And he told me that please consider tax as a last resort. So I asked him why you have the law, why you don't want no willing to use it. It's like he afraid of the negative impact on economic on the industry. And he mentioned about the SME. A lot of SME in the plastic industry will get affected on this one, blah blah blah. So I'm not sure that whether you consider this kind of point or not. It's like we have the law in place, but no one willing to enforce it. Why? Maybe you can give more analysis on that one. And for the upcoming draft act, also because we are in a team that we support PCD, right, to draft the act. So we know there are two main economic instrument in the draft act so far, like ARF you mentioned, but I see the difference between your analysis and the draft act so far is about the levy, because in the draft act we have damage fee, right? But it's not equal to single plastic levy. It's not like single plastic charging at consumer or at point of sale in your analysis. But for the draft act that PCD imposed the damage fee or levy, that they try to collect the fee from producer and earmark it to the environmental fund to support the cleanup program of the local government. So I think that it's quite different policy instrument. Maybe you have to make it clear that it's quite different policy instrument. And link, if your findings see that you estimate quite big impact from single-use plastic levy, you should suggest PCD that please include this economic instrument in the draft act, which is still lacking right now. So try to make it clearer that this instrument is still lacking. And linking further thinking to that, you mentioned that even we propose to have the plastic single plastic levy, like plastic bag charging that many countries have implemented, it might have some limitation because we can maybe impose only on modern trade or supermarket, like accounting for 30% of the plastic carrier bag. For small vendors, we cannot impose. In such case, I would like you to investigate further the actual implementation of Hong Kong. I heard that the regulation they have implemented the phased approach, starting with the plastic bag charging with big shop supermarket, and now they implement it with small vendors. So I quite wondering how they can implement it, and whether we can follow their pathway or not. This is one thing. Or if not, maybe we just mention that, okay, this policy instrument can be applied with the big modern trade or supermarket or convenience store. I think it's quite give big impact for Thailand to reduce plastic leakage. But for other plastic, single plastic that we use a lot for vendors is monofilm plastic bag that we use to contain food. Panet in Thai, ถุงแกง maybe Vincent, you have heard about ถุงแกง. It's like we use quite a lot of that kind of bag to contain a lot of food and drink something. And that one have been used a lot by small vendors. And I think this kind of plastic type, we can impose the single-use plastic tax or fee. I mean, from the factory, from the producer, in order to increase the price and to reduce the demand, because we cannot ask small vendor to put plastic bag charging at their operation. So whether we can tailor the application of economic instrument by the different type of the plastic of the single plastic or not, this is my main question to you. Maybe that's all for now. Thank you very much.
Erin, may I go first?
Oh, why, yes, you can. So just thank you very much, Dr. Sajitra. So we will now give Vincent and Dr. Panay a few minutes to respond to Dr. Sajitra's review. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Sujitra. I mean, you asked a lot of pertinent questions, and all these need to be addressed as we, do a study such as this. And also, it is a very, I would say, kind of a first baby step kind of study in this direction. But I want to answer this question, all the questions at a little bit of a higher level, which is to say, your conversations with people regarding why don't we introduce taxes, on virgin plastic, for example. I think, something like this takes, very strong political will. And you said political acceptance is very poor. And also it's an extremely unpopular decision to take. But how does the rest of us deal with this? Basically, we are all enjoying plastic pollution thanks to no taxes. So we are the externalities of that the plastic pollution we are experiencing, and unfortunately we are suffering from that. So on one hand, it's an easy decision not to take, but also on another hand, it's something that can be taken. Now, I want to tell a story. Back in 2019, in Thailand, most of us will remember Mariam. Yeah. Mariam was this cute little dugong baby. It was in the news, and then it died, and then post-mortem showed that its condition its death was due to plastics in its internals, organs, because it had ingested plastics. So at that time, the willingness of actors, to take action was incredible, trying to stop use of plastic shopping bags and all. Just an incredible big step. Now, if it can be done then, because there is a will, it can be done again. But the trouble was, at that time, we took one great step forward and everything was hampered because suddenly, we had to deal with COVID, and people were thinking hygiene first, plastic pollution later. So, I mean, the thing is, what we are trying to do and what we all need to do is having this study. I think the most important outcome is we are all having this conversation now. So the more we have this conversation, with the relevant authorities and the actors in the plastic value chain, the acceptability that we need to do regulatory instruments as well as economic instruments will become very obvious. So we need to keep at this and keep the momentum going. I think I'll stop there. Over to you, Dr. Badit.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I mean, thank you for all the comment and insight. I think you share it with us before in other venue. I actually want to continue from Vincent addressing that whether we take into account political acceptability when we checking enforcement. Yes and no. I mean, we take yes on the certain aspect, like the whether we need a new law, that the major one. But you can see that, for example, deposit refund is a little bit down compared to even like the other two that need a new law. Simply because we also checking the receptive of like industry and others on like deposit refund system, which would be a little bit costly. So we take that kind of acceptance of the instrument. But what we cannot take into account is this kind of, some kind of Vincent talking about like national sentiment. We cannot foresee whether there would be any kind of endangered animal that going to die and causing this sentiment. We cannot take into account with that. And I like that you mentioned the excise department, because sometimes, and this is major thing in our country, because we cannot take into account like personal preference of people high up in the chain of command. And in our country, unfortunately, sometimes that what matter to introduce certain instrument, because I thought that actually excise department, they have like make kind of a U-turn when it comes to plastic tax. That I think you interviewed them before our project. And then at one point, the excise department actually having table a feasibility study of introducing this kind of instrument. But we understand that it might be more for raising the revenue, not like addressing this problem directly. So I mean, this is kind of changing political temperature. We cannot measure that directly in our study, but actually I would say that we should engage more like legislature, member of parliament to know about this issue. So they would take more command, and it would not with like one or two bureaucrats that kind of taking the direction of the policy that we have. So I think general take on that would be, we need to engage with the public and also the representative of our citizen. So that one thing. And the other thing that I want to make clear that the single-use plastic level is not the same with the damage fee and the level of damage fee in the law. And this is because the PCD kind of revising the law even after our project have been completed. And the new version, they mentioned the damage fee about like 60 baht per kilo, which is quite high if you think in terms of the EPR fee. But with 60 baht per kilo, if we take like plastic bag, we would need about 250 bag per 1 kilo. For cup, it would be like 400 cup into a kilo. Actually, this damage fee per unit is actually lower than the level of single-use plastic levy that we introduced in our study. So I'm afraid that this damage fee might have the effect when it comes to raising the fund for cleanup, but discouraging the consumption, it might be milder than what we estimate. Even though it might work in a similar manner, but it would not as effective as like outright single-use plastic levy at the level that we propose, like 0.7 to 1 baht per unit, because this damage fee will be much lower than that. I think it's like 10 stang per unit. So yeah, that what would be my take on this aspect of the law. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Vincent and Dr. Panate, for your response. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. But if you have any further questions for our speakers, please, you can contact them directly, or you can send them to circulareconomy@adb.org, and we can forward them to our speakers. So, we've learned a lot about, or at least we've skimmed the top of what are the possibilities for economic instruments to address plastic pollution and to enable a plastic circularity. And I think it's very clear that, you know, there's a lot more research that needs to be done, but also testing to see how they can be applied and tested in a real world setting. So, you know, we hope that there will be future opportunities to be able to do so together and, you know, build on the work that we've already done in Thailand. And, you know, we hope to see further applications in the region. So with that, I want to thank our 3 speakers today. Thank you, Vincent, Dr. Panit, and Dr. Sujitra for your time and sharing your insights. And again, to everybody, please do take the time to read the policy brief. You would like to know more about this topic. And if you want to keep up with our circular economy webinar series, please do visit our data room for our past recordings, as well as this one, which we will upload soon. And then finally, when you leave this webinar, you will receive a link for a survey. So please do fill that out so we can create more exciting webinars like this one. So with that, thank you. Have a great rest of the day, and we hope to see you at the next one. Bye.
Bye.
Bye now.
Sawasdee krab.
Thank you.
สวัสดีครับ
Sawadee krap.